If you're a listing agent in Charlotte and you think AI hasn't changed your business yet, that's the blind spot. AI is already baked into the tools buyers use every day. Search, recommendations, photos, video, and even how listings get filtered before a showing ever happens. And yet, a lot of agents around Charlotte still say, this is interesting, but it's not urgent. That assumption is exactly why I want you to see this. The video we're about to watch isn't from an agent, it's not from a media company, it's from the consumer. And what they're saying about AI and real estate, it should make any Charlotte listing agent pause. I'm going to pause this along the way and call out what matters, what's being overlooked, and what this actually means for your listing and your brand in a competitive Charlotte market. Before we begin, the creator of this video it says it's okay for you to use it.
My philosophy is that anything I upload is de facto free for anyone if they want to use it.
I don't have any claims to it. This is not me attacking them or saying that their beliefs is completely wrong. This is just me addressing what they have to say from a media creator standpoint. All right, so let's get into it.
Real estate is a game of perception. Actually, sales in general is a game of perception. Typically, you polish the car before you sell it, or you clean the couch before looking for a buyer. But real estate in particular is a complicated dance of expectation versus reality.
I do agree with this. Real estate is 100% a game of perception. Not in the sense of like you have to deceive a person, which is why there are certain techniques that we don't employ here at peakabodemedia. The main one that's like popular is grass screening. We don't do that here. And the reason for that is because people are going to show up to the house. And not only that, grass screening makes the property look fake because you can tell that the grass doesn't belong. Yes, most MLSs allows realtors to use this technique, but we choose not to employ that technique for the simple fact that we want to put your best foot forward always. And starting off with a photo that's already been altered in a way that isn't necessarily to further the sale, it's always going to be perceived as a lie when they show up, and it's not like that. And I can already hear some people saying, but what about, like in the winter months and fall and things of that nature? Honestly, if that is the case where you do have a listing that goes live during those months and the front facade happens to be a little bit out of shape, what I would suggest is if your listing absolutely has to go live, then put it live with those photos that's there. And then when spring rolls around and things start to come back into their full color and full nature, just do an exterior refresh. You don't have to do the entire inside all over again if by chance your listing hasn't sold by then. But honestly, I feel like giving them the full picture from the start is a much better bet, and the chances of your listing sitting on the market to the point where another season comes around is pretty low in my opinion.
Over the decades, all sorts of different techniques have been employed. Some of the more common ones include things like wide-angle lenses or fisheye lenses sometimes, which manipulate the captured image to make spaces appear larger.
Now, yes, when this industry first started, at the time, fisheye lenses was the go-to because, of course, it captured the entire space. But now that it's been around for a little bit and more techniques have been discovered, now the average range is between 15 and 18 millimeter. That way you still get enough of the room. Generally, it's about 2 walls with a little bit of a third wall in there to give you a good feel of the space, which is why most real estate photographers will take a photo from both sides of the room. So fisheye lenses aren't really used anymore in the industry, at least by people who have experience. Someone who's starting out usually gets told to start with the gear that they have. So in that case, if it is indeed a fisheye lens, then that's how you end up with this distorted image. Now, the other reason why fisheye lenses are often discouraged in this industry is because they create what's known as the barrel effect. So when you look at the image, you'll notice like there's bowing at the edges. Because of that, fisheye lenses aren't really used anymore.
Another technique known as staging relies on the use of beautiful furniture or wall decorations to make the property much more appealing. The idea is that buyers will look at these decadent layouts and associate them with the property itself, thereby picturing something similar if they become the owners. Obviously, none of the furniture comes with the property, but the purpose is to show potential buyers what their new home could look like, thereby making them much more likely to make the actual purchase. These techniques work, by the way. Homes with effective staging spend less time on the market and they fetch higher prices.
Yes. 100% that is the purpose of staging, to get the buyer to envision what the property could look like. Most people will say it so that they can see how their furniture fits in there. If you've moved at any point in your life, then you know the number one thing that's probably going to give you an issue is your couch. So seeing a couch in the space is always a good idea to show the size of the room. Beds is also another thing. I mean, at this point, most people have either a queen or a king bed. So seeing how one of those fit into the space is also very helpful. So I don't think staging is a bad idea at all. In fact, I always encourage realtors, if you can afford it, definitely swing for the staging. Not only does it make the photos look better, but it also gives the buyer a better visual of the space. And of course, I mean, it's reasonable to think that the furniture does not come with the property, which is why close-up detail shots of the furniture, no matter how well it's staged, isn't a good idea because it could send the wrong message. So I always discourage detail shots in that sense because they don't necessarily showcase a feature that's coming with the house. At the end of the day, the house is what's being sold, and that's what needs to be featured most. So if it's not coming with the house, skip the detail shot.
Capturing great photographs means more initial interest, more bids, more competition, and thus higher sales price. There's a very good reason why real estate agents employ these tactics, and yet up until recently, there seemed to be a sort of line in the sand, if you will. Sure, the furniture was brought in special, the images were touched up with better visual contrast and things like that, but none of it was an actual outright lie. Exaggeration is probably accurate, but even the most prolific real estate agents were fundamentally still working with the property on hand.
I don't agree with this. And the reason why I don't agree with this is the photos that real estate photographers try to capture aren't necessarily an exaggeration. Yes, they are touched up. And the reason for that is what the human eye sees in the space and what the camera is able to capture aren't the same. So we do have to brighten up some of the images just so you can actually see what the space looks like. Especially, I don't even know what the proper name for it is, but like the little lights that aren't a fixture, but they're like circular in the roof. I don't want to say the other word, but they're like circular in the roof. Those are horrible lights for real estate photography. Absolutely horrible. They do not give off enough light to light the space and show what it's like. So we have to employ techniques like HDR, which is where you take bracketed photos at 3 exposures. If you take 3 photos at different exposures, you have to blend those together to get a cohesive one. The technique we used here at Peakabodemedia is the flambient technique, which is basically when we use a flash layer and an ambient layer, we combine those together. That way we still maintain the true to life colors of the wall, the true to life shadows that's in the space, things of that nature. So it sounds like it's an exaggeration because Photoshop has synonymously been known as a thing that you use to fake things, but that isn't the reason why real estate photographers use Photoshop. It's one, because it's the most powerful tool out there for this particular type of media. And 2, because it's the only way for you to get a true feel for the space where it doesn't look dark and dingy. So that's why I don't agree with the way that that's being framed there. For me, it came off as like we were intentionally trying to be deceptive, which isn't the case. And actually, many MLSs tell you that you can't make any changes to the property that's going to completely change it. For us, we call it property effective changes. So if there's a hole in the wall, we can't Photoshop that out. It has to be there. If the wall is painted a certain color, we have to maintain that color because we don't know when the owner is going to paint it. Even if they say, hey, it's going to get painted this weekend. If that's the case, perfectly fine. Paint it this weekend, take a photo of it, send it over, and we'll change the color if we can. If not, it's a matter of a reshoot, which shouldn't take that long if it's just one room or whatever the case may be. But MLS have strict rules as to what is and isn't allowed to be changed on a property because, again, it's about a true to life representation.
AI-powered virtual staging. This part honestly isn't all that bad, but one of the more logical implementations of AI in real estate is to virtually stage a potential home or apartment, thereby saving money in the process. Plenty of companies are now doing this, offering tools and services where sellers can populate their rooms with matching sofas and dining sets or touch up their pictures.
I agree. Virtual staging is actually one of the beneficial uses of AI in this space. Especially if you're a new realtor starting out and you don't have the money to pay for staging and you have an empty listing, then absolutely, I say go ahead and use virtual staging. Now, the caveat that I will say is you definitely want to label it as a virtually staged image. So either you yourself could add that or ask the media creator that you work with to add that to it. And the reason for that is, again, they're going to show up, they're going to see the property. So if you have it virtually staged and they show up and it's not there, it's kind of jarring.
When you consider the fact that the same effects can be achieved with a little bit more money, some physical labor, and Photoshop, it doesn't seem all that bad. To be clear, some of these tools are more deceptive than others, changing the color of molding, substituting brick with other materials, visually removing cracks and stains, which is certainly not okay by itself, but again, relatively minor on the scale of real estate deception. Here's the thing though, as with any profit-driven industry, if a tool exists that can make the product more appealing, people inevitably use it in excess, and the same is true of real estate.
All of those changes that he just listed off are what I referred to earlier as property affecting changes. So those aren't things that you would legally be allowed to do. The MLS would absolutely come after you for those, rightfully so at that.
But what happens if you take it like 3 to 5 steps further? What happens when you start using generative AI to straight up alter the property? Not to make it look better or visualizing furniture. What happens when you straight up just lie? We used to call that fraud, but now the hustle bros and the real estate sellers call it 10xing your potential.
All right, so I'm laughing at this part because he's not wrong, but also this, again, is someone that's not in the industry and they're just on the outside looking in. So there is a space for generative AI being used to alter the space. Now, in my mind right now, I can only think of one, and I'm sure a lot of you will agree with this. And that's when it comes to new construction, where you're looking at a walkthrough of just the studs, right? And you're trying to give them an idea of what the space could potentially look like. But even then, I still think you have to put out a disclaimer that says that this isn't the final thing. This is a rendering, some kind of disclaimer that lets the viewer know that this is not real. This is not what you're going to see if you show up, right? But in that case, I absolutely think that is one area where it's totally okay for you to use AI to change what's being shown.
Let's just rip the Band-Aid off.
All right. Now, this is exactly what I'm talking about, right? Do you see how the grass just looks so fake? The overall image now becomes fake. Looking at this, I can assume that the person used something probably like ChatGPT or Nano Banana to do this. And the reason why I say that is it's completely changed the facade of this building. It looks similar, but from my perspective and for how long I've been doing this, I can tell you right now, these are two different properties just based off the AI changes.
Look at these two images. I feel like a kid at the dentist office. Find the differences in the photographs. But look at these two photos and try to spot what's different. Just to clarify, although the company has since taken it down, this was an actual listing on a real estate website. What do we see? Well, for starters, the gardens are completely changed. The left side is just a totally different thing. The window proportions and architecture have been redone. The awning is different, among other things. And I can say with total confidence right now that the line between exaggeration and flat out lie has been obliterated.
Exactly. The left side is completely different. The other thing too is I'd assume the reason why they changed the left side, at least why they attempted to change the left side, is to get rid of the realtor sign. MLSs have a very strong rule about having anything in there that points directly at the realtor. So any branding material has to go, no matter how big or how small. And you're probably saying, but the realtor's name is going to be on the listing anyway. That is true, but the MLS just does not want any branded material at all.
How about this one? Surface level glance, it doesn't seem all that bad, but then you start to notice that there's an entire countertop and set of cabinets missing, which have been replaced by a window. Also, the floor is entirely different.
This right here, again, is the downfalls of using something like ChatGPT or Nano Banana. It still tries to correct for the space that you're using it in. But as you can see, it adds details. And again, these would not be allowed by the MLS because it's added an entire window that does not exist and remove cabinets which do exist. This is indeed fraud.
Here's another one. $900 per month for a one-bedroom apartment, the AI enhanced listing, and now reality. These are different images. They're not enhanced, they're lies. The fridge is gone, the entire shape of the room has been changed, the doorway on the right-hand side is just not there, and the windows are new. I won't harp on individual examples for too long because there's a shit ton of them, although this one in particular is very funny. Can you spot the issue? The AC unit in the low ceiling loft, which somehow has an entire queen-sized bed arrangement crammed into a tiny little 3-foot ceiling space, which is like the lowest effort deception possible. But hopefully the issue is becoming clear, because real estate sellers, now given access to an unlimited supply of generative AI editing capabilities where previously they had to use Photoshop and have some sort of actual skill with a software program, that's no longer needed. They're using these features to commit fraud.
I agree. This is a lie. There's no other way to put that. And again, if you notice, there is no marking anywhere on this image to let you know, hey, this is virtually staged, right? So not that that would make it better, because unfortunately, this wasn't even virtually staged in the sense of you taking the photo that was provided to you by the media creator and then added the virtual furniture into it. This is just a complete reimagination of the space. So that is just a flat out no.
But it gets worse. The interesting thing about real estate is that deceptively editing photographs almost feels like a fool's errand. At least it used to feel that way. When people set out to buy a home or rent an apartment, they're typically visiting the actual property. They're taking a tour, seeing it for themselves, like stepping into the rooms and making their decision afterward, right? They think on it for a few days or a week.
This is 100% right. I feel he's missing, but also hitting the point at the same time. And by that, I mean, the purpose of the photos aren't to be a full representative of the space. They're not a situation where you're supposed to say, hey, you know what? I saw these photos. I'm ready to purchase. The issue is now that most buyers start their shopping online, you have 2 days in the weekend when open houses are held. So you have to decide which ones you want to see. And that's where the pictures come into play, because you get to see what it looks like online and you're hoping that that is an accurate representation, so that when you say, you know what, let's go see this one this weekend, when you show up on Saturday and Sunday, what you see online is what you see when you show up in person. That is, at least is the hope. And that is at least what we strive for here at Peakabodemedia. There's the belief that realtors like their photos white and bright, and that is the case. But what I've found is the more realtors that I work with, the more accurate the representation is, the better off it is for them in the end, because that does two things. It confirms to them that you're a realtor that they can trust, and it also confirms to them that there isn't anything you're trying to hide.
During and after the COVID pandemic, there was a dramatic shift in consumer retail spending habits, which even went so far as to include car loans and real estate. According to Millennial Home Buyer Survey info in 2021, as well as data provided by Zillow, 59% of millennials are at least somewhat confident making an offer on a home that they toured virtually, but never in person. 1 year later, 2022, 90% of millennials indicated that they would buy a home sight unseen, as it's called, with various criteria, one of which, at 53%, was a pre-recorded virtual tour, which would make them comfortable buying a home without ever seeing it in person.
Okay. Now, this, I will say, is one of those things that absolutely needs to be clarified. The videos that you see aren't a virtual tour of the house, but the term has been used interchangeably with 360 photos taken of a space that is indeed an actual virtual tour. And the reason why it's called a virtual tour is because the media creator often uses a 360 camera that is placed strategically throughout the room, usually to maintain line of sight between the previous shot and the next shot, to show the entire space. Those aren't bad because generally it's very hard to edit those to be deceptive, right? I'm not saying it can't be done, and I'm not saying it isn't done. What I am saying is it's usually hard and the time spent isn't really worth it in the end. But it allows you to click through the house on your own time at your own pace. No realtor is actually going to rush you if you're showing interest in the space, right? You guys don't do that, right? So it's an equivalent of that. Now, what I do say is it oftentimes takes away from the personal touch that you can provide. You might know something about the house that, the homeowner did or changed, or like there's like a hidden feature. Those things are generally harder to capture on a virtual tour, which is usually where the video comes into play. All this is to say is there is a distinction that needs to be made between a virtual tour and a video of the space.
Because with a combination of different tools, you can now, rather easily, I might add, create a fake digital tour. This right here is a company called AutoReel, and it's far from the only example, which allows people to take photographs and turn them into a video. Right now, it's only short durations. You can't exactly create an in-depth, rapidly spinning video that walks with continuity throughout the entire house in one, continuous shot. But you can take a fabricated image, which was originally based on a real image, and turn that into a set of video renders, thereby creating at least a passable virtual tour.
So when it comes to the continuity video, which is oftentimes referred to as walkthrough videos, I found that no one actually watches those anymore. Is there still room for those kind of videos? Possibly, but in today's day and age, especially with the TikTokification of everything, I don't think those videos are worth it. Right now, I would say a video between 1:30 and 2 minutes, 3 minutes max. That is what I would say is the ideal range, which is where stuff like this does come into play. Now, I do question these types of videos in the sense of you saw how easy it was for the AI to reimagine the space when you were just asking it to change one minor detail. Now, from what I've seen in the Facebook groups that I'm in, people swear by them, say that they don't make any changes or anything crazy. From what I understand of the process, it's essentially the photos that the media creator takes, they then upload to this website or a similar website, and that then spits out a 3 to 5 second clip that they can then turn into a video. But again, if for some reason you can't afford the cost of what it takes to shoot an actual video of the space, this is an alternative that is being pitched by creators in the space. Unfortunately, it just isn't something that we feel is up to our standards. So it is not a service that we provide, but there is, I guess, a reason for it to exist.
The ability for people to take an image, in this case, a real estate photograph, and then animate that image into a moving context-aware video is only ever increasing. And if you combine this capability with a trend where more and more and more young people are willing to buy houses sight unseen, as in never physically visiting, only relying on photos and virtual tours, you wind up in a position where real estate sellers have the ability to dramatically inflate the perceived value of their property. First, you take a real photograph, pretty simple, then you plug it into one of the many AI editing programs. There's tons of them. After that, even if the entire structure of the room is now different, which obviously happens, you turn that photograph, which conveniently no longer has the scuff marks or the stains or the holes in the door frame and has a completely different countertop variation. You turn that photograph into a virtual tour, and then you put up a listing that has a genuine chance of attracting a buyer who will then commit themselves to the purchase without ever setting foot on the property. Obviously, that's the most extreme case. It is, but we also need to consider the fact that people take days off of work in order to drive out and look at different properties. Sometimes they commit to long travel distances in order to check out potential listings. So on the upside, they find out in person, wow, they're faking what the house looks like. But the inherent downside is that every single person who goes to look at this property, which could be hundreds of people or families, has had their time wasted. They may have missed out on a different property that they would have been looking at in the meantime. They wasted money on gas, they took sick leave or vacation time, and who knows whatever else, because the seller is committing fraud.
And this, again, is why I strongly advocate just show the property as is. I get it, not every property is going to look its best, but there are certain things that she can do photography wise that doesn't make it look like you're intentionally trying to lie or omit certain things that they're going to see. If the furniture looks a certain way in the space, show that. If the light hits the room a certain way, show that. If there is going to be shadows, the one thing that bugs me that I've seen in a lot of photos, and I understand why they do it, is the white ceilings that look like pristine white to the point where you're like, wow, that's a really white ceiling. No ceiling, even to your own natural eyes, look that white, even if they are white. You will see a little bit of shadow cast on them. You will see shadows, especially in the corner areas, a little darker. So we try to maintain those as well, because again, we're trying to show you how the light hits the room at that particular point. Now, the argument could be made that you should take photos at the best time for the house, make sure there isn't any harsh shadows or anything like that. Ideally, that would be key. Realistically, the chances of that happening, especially with your schedule and the media creator schedule, are little to none. So just do your best to provide an accurate representation. And like he said, people are taking time off from work. They are driving long distances. There's a whole bunch of struggling behind the scenes that they have to do. And the absolute last thing you want to happen is for them to show up, be disappointed, and now think that every listing from you is just going to be a lie, or you can't be trusted with your listings. That is not what you want. You spent a lot of time building your reputation in this industry. Your reputation is your largest currency in this industry. So don't do anything that could potentially harm that. That's the view that we take here. So we try to work with realtors who understand that and believe in that as well.
It's a fine line between embellishment and deception, because you can make something look good in order to make it more appealing without lying.
I couldn't have said it better myself. That is exactly what I've been trying to get across about property affecting changes, and I couldn't have said it better myself. But yeah, so like I said, this was just a really cool idea that I had to react to the views of someone outside of the industry that's potentially a consumer, so that agents like yourself can see what they're thinking about the methodologies being used in the industry. I do agree, you definitely have to, again, I can't stress it enough. Realism is what we're going for here. They are going to show up. You don't want to waste people's time because that affects your reputation in the end, right? You definitely want to be as accurate as possible. You want to show potential future sellers that, hey, I'm someone you could trust with your property. These are the things that I do and don't do. Because you have to understand, sellers are familiar with the techniques being used out there to show properties, because they themselves are probably looking at the next property that they're going to purchase and seeing all the things that agent's seeing all the things that agent has been doing to represent those listings, right? And comparing yours to theirs. So I definitely think there is a space for all the new things that are coming out, but I think the answer is it being done tastefully. And by that, I mean, there are certain techniques where it just never makes sense for it to be in this space, in my opinion. For example, like the alien ships and things of that nature, like that, I feel like is just unrealistic and taking it too far. If you found this content useful, please be sure to subscribe and like this video, as we post a new video every week on this channel going over various aspects, whether it's something that you could be using in your branding material or what consumers think about this industry and their views and how things are moving forward. If you're an agent in the Charlotte area and you're looking for a new media creator to partner with, consider using Peakabodemedia. Links to our website is in the description below.